federal government shutdown continues as the Democrats pander to the extreme woke left. Hamas begins executing Palestinians as they violate the ceasefire, killing Israeli soldiers. Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu says he will seek another term in office. What are his prospects? And finally, President Trump waffles on Ukraine support as a peace deal continues to elude him. You're listening to Mensch-Kight Geopolitics. Mensch-Kight Geopolitics is your home for conservative commentary on international affairs with an eye toward Israel and the Middle East. I'm your host, Isaac Kite, your lovable lawnsman, your gregarious Vulcan, your mad genius, your shadow president, and your prophet of things to come. Welcome back, Insiders. It's been too long again, but at least it hasn't been a month, so work with me here. We're getting back on track slowly but surely. My Insiders, my mention, the greatest, most erudite audience in the world. You guys are back for one more episode. This is episode 150. 150 episodes of this podcast since I started Inside Israel News. For 5 years ago now, and I've been trying to keep up with episodes and trying to keep you guys informed. And great episode for you today. Lots of stuff to talk about. I've had so many people, writing in, Isaac, we got to hear about what you think about the ceasefire, and it's coming. And believe me, my friends, it is worth the wait. So that and Israeli politics heating up. Talk a little bit here about entertainment before I dive into the American politics section. I just want to say, so my kids have been going wild over this K-pop Demon Hunters. And while the title, K-pop Demon Hunters, sounds like an anime or something, it's actually kind of complicated to come up with a title for this movie. It's a great movie. There's actually a YouTube video out there. Did Sony accidentally create a Christian movie? Not really. It's just that Korean traditional culture is not woke. Right, like they don't have any kissing, the male and female, let alone lesbian kisses, which we've been having on, kids shows. Kids shows don't really need romance. Okay, like if two characters really like each other, or there's sort of a romance there, okay, that's an emotional connection, and we want to see that emotional connection. But like this kissing thing, like that's taken it a step too far. We don't really need that. Peck on the cheek maybe can be comic or what have you, but we don't really need it, right? And the Koreans left that out of this movie. Although they originally thought they were going to have a kissing scene of some sort, but anyway, got taken out. But nevertheless, it's still a great show. I highly recommend it. The kids will love it. Good music. The main song, Golden, has been at the top of the U.S. charts. First K-pop song to set this record. So Korean music is on the radar, on the map. And I'm loving it because it means that my dweebometer, my status as geek, has declined ever so slightly. Just took my daughter and one of my sons to see Baby Monster recently, another K-pop group. So the kids love the music, and it's like I said, it's traditional and appropriate. Highly recommend. Why it's blowing Disney out of the water, it's not woke. And I thought it was interesting. Some fairly sensible feminists on YouTube have been going around talking about how the young ladies who are our heroines in K-pop Demon Hunters are real people. Like you can relate to them. They burp, they make faces, they're silly and ridiculous sometimes. They're vulnerable and human. Like they're girls, well, young women in this case, but you know what I mean? They're real people. Like, we get these superhero movies and we get, Captain Marvel, and they're all these female, and they're perfect and they have no flaws and they're just better than all the men around them. And, they kick them and beat them and twist them around and it just, girl power. And none of that's believable, in Chinese fight movies, what I always like is that when they have female characters fighting male characters, usually in swordplay or whatever, they very intelligently have the female characters use leverage and movements and avoid, direct contact. Like, so in one of my favorite Japanese martial arts of kendo, the swords will meet and then you kind of push one another back and forth to gain leverage and try to get a strategically advantageous situation where you can attack the enemy without taking any damage or harm to yourself, right? So kendo is a defensive martial art, for those who are wondering. And I've got a couple of kendo sticks, kendo swords. They're made with bamboo. And my kids and I have a great time working on this leverage thing. But that has a lot of strength in it. Right. Anyway, the point is, you see these things. It's like, men have 5 times the muscle mass of women. So you get these big bodybuilder villain types and, some little woman comes over and beats them up. I mean, I guess Scarlett Johansson's character has some super juice or something because, she's flying around kicking people and that kind of thing. At least she's using some leverage. But again, that it isn't believable. Right. It would be more believable, the use of guns and, leverage. Again, like I said, in Chinese fight with the swords and all of that, they will make glancing blows. They're not stupid. They want it to be believable. Nobody's going to believe that some big muscular guy is going to get into a shoving match with the sword. The swords have made contact and they're doing this little kendo thing with a woman who has, 1/5 his strength at best. This is ridiculous. So, now there are bigger, stronger women. I'm not getting in the ring with Gina Carano or Ronda Rousey. I might ultimately win, but I'm probably going to get the snot beat out of me first. In any case, if I were in shape for that sort of thing, this last flu and the bronchitis really took it out of me. I'm still trying to get my breath back. I don't know if you can hear it, but I mean that. I've got a couple of friends in the same place. We're trying to work and move on with life, but it's still taking its toll months after we've recovered, or month after we've recovered. I mean, these viruses are getting nasty, my friends. Anyway, I'm trying to get back into shape, keep my voice, and get my my breath back. So I'm working on it. We're getting there. All right. American politics. We have gone to the, from the mundane to the inane. It gets more ridiculous by the day. So, John Fetterman and 2 other Democrats are the only Democrats voting to pay for the government, right? That's with the Republicans in the Senate, that's 56 votes, and they need 60 to reopen the government. And when this initially happened, obviously the Democrats were involved in the negotiation process. There was a process on the budget, and they had a chance to have their say. They keep trying to say, well, the Republicans wouldn't give us any say. That's a bunch of nonsense. We know that. If you go listen to Senator Kennedy and Speaker Johnson and Ted Cruz, a lot of other people have been going around talking about this process, and they had plenty of time to have their say. To avoid a shutdown, the Republicans put forth, quote, a clean CR. That's a continuing resolution. It's not a budget. It just continues spending at past levels. It's literally saying we're just gonna keep spending as we have heretofore, and until a certain deadline, and that would theoretically then allow the government to be funded while the senators and representatives negotiate and come up with a deal, right? And the Democrats keep saying it's not a clean CR. Even Chris Cuomo, even left-wing media personalities have been calling the Democrats out for this, and that is beautiful. This is an amazing thing. And then, of course, Trump made the point that one of the main demands that the Democrats have, in addition to basically reversing the one big beautiful bill, like, so there was an election in November, and all of those things on that agenda were part of why the American people voted for Donald Trump and the Republicans to have the majority in both houses of Congress. Trump as president and a Republican Congress. Elections, they have consequences. I'm sitting here shrugging my hands. If you could see me, oi gewalt. We had an election. Elections have consequences, don't they? That's what they used to say when, Barack Obama got reelected, and the Democrats, well, elections have consequences. Well, they do. They really do. Anyway, so they've made a real mess for themselves for the first time in my lifetime. I mean, we've had shutdowns before. Republicans always get the blame. The pressure and the temperature always turns up on us because the media is always on their side. Well, this time has been a little different. Trump picked for his optics, again, man is a master of strategy and optics, how things look. He pointed out that one of the things they want to do is, restore healthcare funding that would allow illegals to go to the emergency room and would reimburse emergency rooms for illegals getting healthcare benefits. So we've run with this thing, they're holding out, they're shutting down the government to provide healthcare to illegals. Now, on that issue, the American people are 2-1 against, more than 2-1. It's overwhelming. Americans are overwhelmingly against this. So for the first time in my lifetime, the Republicans are not completely getting the blame. It's more or less 50-50, depending on which polls you see. It's 46-48, 47-40, approximately equal. And there's equal blame there. Our constitutional system is not designed to turn on a dime. It is designed to force compromise. The framers assumed, safely in their time, that there would be rational, reasonable people, and that we would sit down and make compromises and make deals. And you give a little, and we give a little, and everybody, nobody's completely satisfied, but everyone goes home, and we move on. Right? That's not the way this is working. So they're taking some of the blame. Trump has brilliantly shifted the shutdown to immigration, while the Democrats are trying to make it about healthcare. And the more they say healthcare, the more people hear Trump's point that it's healthcare for illegals, and it's there. And we all know, the only reason the government is shut down is because Chuck U. Schumer, as Rush Limbaugh used to call him. Love Rush's nicknames for people. They're so much fun. Chuck U. Schumer is afraid that one Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going to run against him in the primary. And that's why he is doing the shutdown. He doesn't want to get run out of office by, the nutters in his party. It's not going to work. And if AOC is going to run against him, she's going to run anyway. She's having a harder and harder time keeping her seat in New York. And she noticed the last time that there were people in her district who voted for Trump. The margin was higher than her vote. In other words, there were people who voted for Trump and voted for her in her district. And so she started to figure out that, hey, some of the people who keep her in office are Trump supporters. So you might want to think twice before, doing this whole orange man bad. Well, she's continued with the orange man bad, but in any case, it's going to get harder and harder for her to keep her office. So she might look at running for Senate, where she can maximize, she can capitalize on the woke votes in New York City to get her over the top in the primary. And then, of course, New York's a deep blue state, so it's very difficult for a Republican to win. Now, if she ran for Senate, if a Republican ran that was pretty good, maybe. I mean, we're seeing, at least Stefanik is getting much closer to the polls, to Hochul. Kathy Hochul is just a terrible governor. And so, in a deep blue state where there should be no competition, this should be a 20-point spread, at least Stefanik and Kathy Hochul. Stefanik's bringing it closer and closer. Every poll I see, the numbers are getting tighter and tighter. Now, it's not exactly competitive just yet, but it is getting there. Meanwhile, more polls in New Jersey and Virginia that show in New Jersey, it's a tie statistically in most polls. And if there are polls, then Mikey Sherrill is just ahead a little bit. I think I called her Mickey last time. Mickey makes sense for a woman. Mikey, I don't know. People come up with names and nicknames and how they want to be called, and it doesn't have to make sense to me, my friends. So I'm just doing the best I can with people's names. And some commentators online have been saying Mickey, and some have been saying Mikey, and so I don't know. Pick your name, okay? Go with it. Anyway, and Cheryl is a terrible candidate, and so Chattarelli is doing really well there. I really wish him well. He almost won last time against Murphy, and Murphy's an incumbent. But the Dems have been so bad in New Jersey. So anyway, Republican turnout in early voting much higher than the 2024 election. Republican enthusiasm in the election, as in, who plans to vote, is much higher than the Democrats, 7-8 points above Democrats. So something like 84-85% of Republicans are very enthusiastic and definitely going to vote, whereas it's more like 70-74 for Democrats. So what we're seeing is that the Republicans have a shot. That shouldn't be the case, as I described in the last episode. That shouldn't be possible. But anyway, here we are. than this time. And the Democrats continue to embarrass themselves. People on the left, we've got no kings protests, my friend. Again, from the mundane to the inane. It's getting dumber and dumber out there every day. It's like my brains are dribbling out my ears just talking about this stuff. So America had a No King's Day almost 250 years ago when they signed the Declaration of Independence. We haven't had a king since. We basically told the king what to go do with himself. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And what, and consent of the governed. We're done with this king thing. And when we drafted a constitution, it's a republic. With a presidency, so that we wouldn't have a king again. We have a president, and we elected him. You might say there was a huge No Kings protest on November 5th. The American people came out, voted in large numbers, 77 million plus, voted for Donald Trump, myself included, and he won. Now, maybe you should just take it and get over it. I mean, when we lose. Ultimately, we move on, right? But when they lose, it's the end of the world. Anyway, it's just ridiculous. It's like they're, people who don't like 4th of July, they're out there protesting for no kings, like don't like patriotism, don't like any of that, but they're no kings. And you see the floats and the signs they have, they're all professionally printed in a huge, parchment of the Constitution moving down the street, and people organized into a human sign that says no kings. That's called being paid for and organized. It's also a whole bunch of old boomers. I'm sorry, boomers, but these old people in their 50s and 60s out there holding these signs or whatever, white people mostly. And it's like, I know you guys went to Woodstock and all that, but you know what? We've moved on. So, wow. And they get silly. I mean, you hear people all the time out there on the left saying ridiculous things. America was founded by old white men for the benefit of old white men. Yeah, that's why, Jews and Asians make more money on average than white people do. Right? Because, America was founded by Jews and Asians for the benefit of Jews and Asians, right? There we were at the Constitutional Convention with, George Rubinstein and Alexander Cho, right? Oh, God, Rufus Yamato, right? And, Benjamin Pradesh. No, my friends, it's just ridiculous. Now, if we're speaking of no kings, so one of the things kings do is, persecute their opponents. So we just had evidence released. Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana has been talking about it, that this guy, Jack Smith, is this special prosecutor, went to the phone companies and wiretapped 8 sitting U.S. senators. Right. And by wiretapping, like he got records of all of their phone and communications for a period of time. And the phone companies just gave it to them. I mean, didn't make a legal issue of it, whatever, just handed it over. Wiretapping senators, and Obama wiretapped Trump back in 2016, right? This is not legal. Okay, it is not a free and fair political process when you are spying on your political opposition. Right. And that's above and beyond the lawfare, all the cases against Trump and the stupid stuff in the first place. So if we're going to have no kings, how about we have democracy and freedom? We have a vote. We make a decision. We made a choice, and we move on. But no, these crazies have to, and increasingly they are becoming more violent. They shot Charlie Kirk. He was a good man, a father. He just argued with people, right? He got up in front of people and he debated, right? I mean, if you've got a great argument, go up against him. Right. I'm sure on some intellectual issue, because, obviously I wouldn't disagree with him much, but were he here today, if I had a debate with him, I probably wouldn't debate, but let's just say for some reason we were going to debate some intellectual issue. Maybe he's for something that I'm against. Let's just take term limits as an example. Let's just say he's for term limits and I'm against. We could have an intellectual argument about it, agree to disagree. Maybe I might convince him. Maybe he might convince me. All's fair. Like, I don't want any harm to come to him. Right? I don't want any harm to come to AOC or any of these people. I don't want them in office, but I don't want any harm to come to anyone. This is politics. That's all it is. And you get these people out there and they're living in this delusion where, everyone who disagrees with them politically is some kind of Nazi fascist. They're evil. And that makes it okay to shoot people. The Delulu is strong with this crowd. We're in dangerous times because of this. And I just hope that they tone it down. Can we all just take a chill pill? Relax? The political process really will play itself out. Okay? In our culture and whatever, it will. So my last point, I labor this point also from last time, that things change, right? And we can't put our head in the sand and fail to acknowledge that things change. And I talked about the last episode, the paradigm that, when I grew up in the Cold War, we had this black and white paradigm, and then we went into shades of gray, and now we're back in black and white, right? We've got the Axis powers who are challenging us for, domination in the world. And there's another paradigm shift that's out there too, because, growing up in the 90s as a teenager, the left had all the social issues, right? When it came to social issues, people generally agreed with the left. And back then, a lot of working class people were on the left. So we all have, as conservatives, this idea that we are the minority, right? We are far to the right, social conservatives, and we just have to let the social issues go. We'll focus on the economic issues or whatever. Boy, has that flipped. The poll numbers show that on these trans issues, on LGBTQ in the schools, on issue after issue from the left, from illegal immigration to crime and punishment, DEI, and all of this racial nonsense, overwhelmingly, the American people, 2-1, are generally with us. And so we've got to shift on this. Now, when it comes to economics, taxes, things like that, things are a little tighter. That's a little bit more 51-49, 50-50, 48-52. That's a little bit more marginal. We know that cutting taxes and certain economic things that President Trump is doing, like the tariffs or whatever, will have long-term benefits for everyone. And so that is a good choice. But at the same time, those are not as popular. So one of the things we have to shift here is start to push those issues. We need a national ban on transition surgeries for children. No child or parent has to be punished, but the doctors who perform these procedures should be culpable if they're performing it on a child. Now, adults are allowed to be stupid, right? Once you're an adult and you're over 21, you can go drink yourself to a stupor and throw up in the toilet and whatever. I mean, unfortunately, you're an adult. You get to do whatever you want. Even if it's harmful to you, it's not my business, right? When you hurt other people, then it becomes a crime, and that's a different story. The point is, adults are allowed to be dumb. Right? As an adult, I can't say I've always made the best choices myself, but we're allowed to be young and dumb a little bit, I think, sometimes, right? Anyway, but children are children, right? I've watched my own children grow, and children are children. And when they're 5, they all want to be police officers and firefighters and fighter pilots. And by the time they're, in their teens, they're thinking about, maybe running an auto shop or doing plumbing and electrical work. I mean, you start to get a little bit better idea of what how we make money, and that and some do become police officers, firefighters, or pilots. But that's the point. Like, you start to, you start to think as you grow up. So if one of my 7-year-old came to me like, I think I'm a girl, go to bed. Like, good night. When we wake up in the morning, you'll have a different notion. But the other thing people don't think about is these procedures, by definition, sterilize children. And because children are not old enough to make that choice, so, if you're an adult and you choose to be sterilized, I mean, there are people doing it. It's crazy to me, but whatever. Okay. If they want to do that. But a child cannot make that choice. So parents who are allowing this, or schools that are doing it around the parents' back, they are forcibly sterilizing children who are not old enough to make that choice for themselves. And that's sick. I mean, it's disgusting stuff. So the American people are overwhelmingly with us on this. We need these laws. We need to stand up on these issues, giving the American people some sanity, getting this crap out of our schools, protecting children. That will help the right. So that my last thought there, on this is just that we need to make the paradigm shift on international affairs about the Axis powers and all that. We're back in a black and white world, but on social issues, we are back in the majority. Now, that doesn't mean that the American people are ready to go evangelical Christian. At the same time, people misunderstand who evangelical Christians are, who are very sensible and actually rather, if you look at the polls of evangelicals, self-identified evangelicals, a rather moderate group and fairly tolerant too. But I think the point here is that we've all had our tolerance tested because we've gone to crazy things. When kids are going to, these trans story time and, anyway, that's just the sexual abuse of children, and it needs to stop. And we need to have the guts on our side to stand up, pass these laws at the state level and at the federal level, get rid of this nonsense. And then the American people will say, hey, thumbs up, you guys stood up for children, we're with you, right? If we don't have the guts for that, but we've been in the minority for so long. We have that mentality sometimes. We think, people don't always agree with some social issues. We should be moderate. We should be timid. Let's not jump into anything. No, let's go full bore here. Let's get on top of this issue and put this country back on track. So that's my thought there. And, for those of us who are religious, let's get good with God. Let's get back on the track of Torah and Bible and biblical morality, and things will get better for us. Because, that's a healthier way to live. There's God's blessings, but following those rules are blessing in and of themselves. That's why God had them written down for us. Plainly, simply put, idiot proof. But we keep making better idiots. It's like, come on, don't steal, don't covet things, don't kill people. It's all pretty easy to understand. So let's get back to that. Let's be decent human beings. Adults can do stupid stuff, but God, let's protect the children. Okay, so that's that. And I'm going to come back from the break and talk about what you really want to hear, probably, because everybody's been messaging me, the ceasefire and Israeli politics. You're listening to Mensch-Kight Geopolitics with Isaac Kite. Or as the internet trolls say, mouthpiece of the Zionist conspiracy, spokesman for the elders of Zion, highly paid propagandist of the Mossad. Yeah, no. Now you're messing with the son of a mensch. All right, let's talk about this ceasefire. So when last I recorded an episode, a ceasefire was on the table. It had been tabled, it had been planned, it had been put forward, and I said I didn't think Hamas was going to take it. Now, they did. I'm glad I was wrong on that within, certain degrees, but I did say, obviously they were not wanting to surrender and disarm. That's unlikely. That's just, there are some miracles, but that's not one of them. But they did return the living hostages, and we're slowly getting bodies back. Sometimes the IDF, they're being located, they're buried under rubble, and so the IDF has to come in with heavy equipment to retrieve them. That's all being worked out. But little bit by little bit, we're getting home the bodies. There's still quite a few that haven't been recovered yet, but the living hostages are back, and that's the most important thing. But families also need remains so that, again, they can have closure. People are buried, and this horror is over. October 7th was such a horrible thing. God, it still haunts me watching those videos that day. I'm like I've said, I'm not the same man I was the day, on October 6th, 2023. You experience real evil. A good number of the paramedics, the Israelis who went in to clean up, to go into the houses and document everything and remove the bodies for identification and burial. Some of them have committed suicide. We are civilized people. We're decent people. And we see horrible things like that. We don't really have a means to cope with it. And some people just can't even live with themselves after seeing it. And I understand. I don't condone it. Obviously, if you're feeling depression, if you're struggling with anxiety, you're not the only one. I have too. most of my life. And sometimes that leads to negative thoughts about, ending your life. And please seek help. Talk to someone. You're not alone, and someone values you. All right? We are all made in the image of God, in his likeness. We all have value. To him, at least, but we should value one another on the same kind of level. And respect one another. And when you see people behaving that horrifically, that barbarically, that is beyond the pale. I mean, I really like that point Neil Ferguson made. The Nazis tried to hide what they did. On some level, somewhere, even the Nazis understood that what they were doing was wrong, right? And Hamas advertised it to the world. They had GoPros on there. Their soldiers, their troopers were hopped up on drugs and amphetamines. They sent them in there to commit all kinds of crimes, and they videoed it and they posted those and celebrated it. It's awful stuff. So obviously Hamas needs to be destroyed. They need to go away. We need a world that is free of Hamas. And the Arabs and Arab governments understand this as well as we do. Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, they want Hamas gone as well. It's a threat to all of them. Qatar has been playing in this process, but Qatar is a puppet of Iran, and lots of people, including Saudi officials, have been warning that Qatar's involvement in this process is unhelpful. I mean, we've seen what Qatari money has done in the U.S., from Tucker Carlson to Candace Owens to several members of Congress. Out there, well, I'm not taking any money from AIPAC. Oh, but that, trip that Qatar paid for you to, millions of dollars for you to go to Qatar and have a great time, that's okay. But not money from AIPAC or, those who advocate for Israel. Difference is 80% of the American people, generally 75 to 80% of the American people, side with Israel. The reason that America supports Israel is that the American people support Israel. I have to remind people of that. It's just the Jews. It's a conspiracy theory. No, the American people support Israel. It's a very simple thing. But Qatar supports Iran. And very small number of Americans are on Iran's side. And even those who are deluded because they've been told America's bad. Woke right, woke left, it's the same thing. America's bad. To the woke left, we're bad because we're, we're imperialists, colonialists, we're meanies. America was founded on slavery and all this kind of nonsense. And to the woke right, or as Bibi Netanyahu very cleverly calls them, the woke Reich, to them, America's bad because we have LGBTQ and we're morally corrupt and all this kind of thing, and we're ruled by the Jews. Sniveling, conniving trolls with horns on their heads who have secret space lasers. So, anyway, Donald Trump is the master of optics, as I've said before. He thinks very strategically, and one of the key lenses through which he observes and pursues his strategies, one of the key directions he has, are the optics, how things look. And it's brilliant because, honestly, that's how you lead people. How things look, how things appear is really important to people. And no one wants to appear to be supporting the bad guys. Oh, the Israelis are white, so white people are bad. And, that must mean the Jews are bad. I've said before, to the capitalist, the Jew is a communist. To the communist, the Jew is a capitalist. To the DEI people, the Jew is white. Whatever, if eating ice cream is bad, Jews are the first people. Oh, Jews are eating ice cream. So putting all that to one side, all this nonsense. So, the stupidity, my friends. Racism and bigotry really are that stupid. So anyway, Donald Trump and his optics. And so what he did is he arranged this ceasefire to create a set of circumstances that put Israel back in the positive light, because we always lose the propaganda war. No matter what I say, no matter what I do, people will go out there and, Jews are evil. Oh, Zionists, right. But that's another word for Jew, really. That's what we're talking about here. It's the Jews. And when people come to kill Jews at synagogues or whatever, they don't ask if they're Zionists first, right? So I mean, just to tell you guys, I just bought another gun to protect the house. So, I mean, if somebody wants to, free Palestine by whacking some yids, if they come to my house, they better be ready to reenact the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, because I'm telling you, we are armed to the teeth. Plenty of ammo and, brand new 12 gauge. And, if somebody tries it, we're going to let the air out of them real quick. So, God bless America and God bless red states where you can, defend yourself, stand your ground laws. That's what I worry about. There's property crime and that kind of thing. Most part in rural America, people don't generally invade homes while there are people in them. At least they think, oftentimes that happens when people are home and they don't know it. In any event, unfortunately, there are nutters out there that I have to worry about because, there's everybody going around talking about how bad Jews are. Well, then, we're Jews, therefore we must be bad too, right? And therefore it must be okay to come and kill us, including my little, 1-year-old daughter with Down syndrome, who is, no harm to anyone, just a cute little girl. But to these people, she's a Jew, and they want to hurt us. Anyway, so Trump's optics here, there's the ceasefire, there's a yellow line, we call it, right? That Israel controls outside of that. They're creating a security perimeter around the Gaza Strip borders so that we will never have this thing again. They'll have to come through over a kilometer of distance, from this security barrier before they can reach the actual border to try to cause harm. And that gives the IDF time to respond if there's a breach before they enter Israel proper, where they could, like 10/7, have access to Israeli civilians. So Israel agreed to the ceasefire. Hamas released the living hostages. We're slowly getting back the dead hostages. Already, there have been several attacks by Hamas. 2 Israeli soldiers were killed in an attack. Something like 15 guys attacked them, and the Israeli soldiers laid them all out. Good for them, but unfortunately at the cost of their own lives. That's heroism for you. I mean, they're fighting for their homes and their lives. So there's that. Now, these violations. So Hamas violates the ceasefire. Israel gets the blame, right? Well, just 2 days ago, the entire pro-Israel community fainted collectively. All of us. I don't know if you guys were aware of it, but if you saw it on X, the post, and saw the headline yourself, we all collectively fainted. We just fell to the floor. We couldn't believe it. The Washington Post published a headline saying that the ceasefire in Gaza had been broken and Hamas was to blame. I almost want to faint right now. I mean, it's a miracle. Moses, has raised his hands and his staff. The waters have parted and the Israelites are walking across on dry land. It's a miracle, my friends. Oh my God. This is the optics. This is the power of Donald Trump. Now, the New York Times is still out doing its, Sieg Heil. It's, they're still doing their stuff. And of course, you have Al Jazeera out there doing the same thing because they're in Qatar and they're a propaganda channel, trying to claim there's no genocide in Nigeria, because Vice President J.D. Vance has been rightly calling attention to the fact that more Christians have died in Nigeria since October 7th than Palestinians have died. And this is miserable. It's got to stop. The fighting in Nigeria is getting ridiculous. So the optics there, that is what Donald Trump is after. Now, we all know Hamas isn't going to surrender. We all know they're not going to disarm, but the optics, and we got our hostages back. And since we value life and we want to be able to bury our loved ones, of course, we're going to take that deal. In the meantime, Hamas went out and started assassinating the male members of the Dagmush clan and several others. Now, the Dagmush clan are not good people, not the kind of people you would like. They were the ones who, for example, kidnapped the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit and held him for many years. But they are not Hamas, or, not all of them are. And so they, Hamas went out and whacked them. And as they were committing this, this reign of terror, one of the Dagmush clan got back at them by killing our poor friend, Mr. Fafawari. We called him Mr. Fafo. That's F around and find out for those of you who are not sure what that means. Anyway, because he had lots of videos, he's celebrating rocket launches and then he's crying, oh, the Israelis are bombing us, oh God. And he's so many videos of him as a radio tech, a radiologist in a medical, and then he's a journalist the next day, and then he's dead and in a he's playing on his phone while he's wrapped in a death shroud. He's been the poster child for Pallywood, for the propaganda war that they've been waging, as ridiculous as it is. And one of the members of the Dagmush clan went and killed him. Of course, a bunch of headlines in The Guardian and other news sources out in the West that he was killed in Gaza, and they kind of left out who killed him, trying to imply that Israel killed him. No, it was Arab on Arab violence. Nobody cares when Arabs kill Arabs. I mean, these people are not racist at all, people in the West, but Arabs are allowed to behave barbarically, and they're allowed to kill each other all they want, but we can't have white people, couldn't have white people do it. I mean, brown-skinned people, they're not as civilized as we are. We can't expect them to behave like we do. That's racism, my friends. Like I said, I hold everyone to the same standards. And as I said in the last episode, Arabs are perfectly capable of being decent and civilized people. All people are. And, some people are barbarians. And when they behave barbarically, we should call them out for it and punish it. Anyway, they're out there executing people, torturing people. They're dropping cinder blocks on legs. They are shooting people in their extremities. They're executing people, shot in the back of the head, in the public square in front of everyone. Now, as J.D. Vance has noted recently, they're not quite a monolithic group anymore. They're kind of disparate groups in different places. And as a result, there's not really a central leadership anymore. And so Hamas is fighting amongst themselves, and they're fighting these other clans, and they're fighting other groups. So there's not really a mechanism for disarming them. Like there's no central Hamas leader who could just order them to disarm. Okay. And as he noted, the infrastructure to disarm them does not exist. Well, now we're calling upon the Arab guarantors of the peace, Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, et cetera, and saying, hey, it's time to go in and do this and clean this up. And so Israel has said they're violating the ceasefire. The United States has made it formal and official. We are saying that they violated the ceasefire, and we've called upon the guarantors to go in and do something. And of course, they're a little sheepish. So if we send our troops in there, they might get shot at. There might be fighting. Yeah, that might happen. So now the rubber meets the road. But this is a beautiful thing. Donald Trump has got the optics more on our side than usual. The nutters and the woke left and the anti-Semites are still going to be nutters, woke left, and anti-Semites. But the sensible, reasonable people in the world are recognizing that Israel is willing to stop, Hamas is unwilling to disarm, and they need to be disarmed, and we're trying to get Arab governments to buy in and help out. But they're not, okay? Not my fault, not Donald Trump's fault, not Israel's fault, theirs. That's their problem. And if they are not willing to do something, then in time, when enough violations have occurred that Israel needs to go back in there and finish the job, well, the IDF is the only institution willing to go do that. Hamas needs to be disarmed. On the big picture side of things, Donald Trump has talked again about people leaving Gaza voluntarily. If there are people living in Gaza who want to leave, right? I mean, let them leave, right? As Trump's been noting, there's plenty of land in Egypt, there's plenty of land in Jordan. Instead of rebuilding their houses in Gaza, we can build them new houses in Egypt, build them new houses in Jordan, right? I know these people tend to commit have a high level of committing crime and this kind of thing. So it wouldn't be a great thing for Egypt or Jordan. But we can't rebuild Gaza. No aid for reconstruction can go in there until Hamas is gone, right? We can't let them rebuild their terror tunnels and all that instead of building homes for people. That's what they did last time. That's what they've been doing for years. So indeed, let's focus on getting the situation there straightened out. But if we can't, let people leave. If people want to go, set up a program, get them out, move them to these other places and let them live. I mean, they want to move voluntarily. We're not talking about forcing anyone, coercing anyone. We're just, if you want to leave, go. If the population there declined, then it would be easier to rebuild, rationally speaking, when the war is over. Meanwhile, those people can get out from under Hamas, because I guarantee you there's no Hamas in Egypt. The Egyptians will not tolerate that kind of nonsense. There's the same with Jordan. So if you're trying to, form terror groups or whatever, you're gonna, the secret police are going to come knock on your door, the army, and whatever the case, they're going to come talk to you, and you're going to have a very unpleasant interrogation, and they're going to find out who you're working with, and you're going to be shut down. Anyway, okay, so that's the ceasefire situation. In the long run, we know that Hamas is not going to want to disarm. Israel is going to have to go back in. No one else is going to do it for them. It would be beautiful to think that maybe someone else will step in, but we'll see. I doubt it. So there's that. But again, Donald Trump has maneuvered things very strategically. Europeans and other leaders who would normally like to play the anti-Semitic card. I mean, after all, this deal almost happened months ago, but Macron and Starmer sabotaged it by saying they were going to recognize a Palestinian state. So Hamas is sitting there like, well, if we ceasefire now, we have to disarm and all this kind of thing. But if we wait, we'll have a Palestinian state, and then we'll be the governing party, right? So they thought, well, we'll just wait it out, and then Israel struck the Hamas leaders in gutter. Problem solved. So that's that. In any case, so we're waiting for the next shoe to drop, the other shoe to drop, waiting to see what happens next, and Trump is managing the optics very well. Now, Trump's ended a bunch of wars, and at this point, I would like to think that there'd be some other way to handle this than Israel having to go back in. I just don't think that's likely. But if Israel does have to go back in, it's going to be because Hamas violated the terms of the ceasefire, not because Israelis are bloodthirsty, sniveling, conniving trolls with horns on their heads, etc., etc. Right? So that will change things. And then maybe, this idea of like a voluntary resettlement, we'll see. And we're not talking about clearing all the Arabs out of Gaza. I don't know how many would leave voluntarily. I would imagine probably half the people would want to stay. Maybe not. Maybe only 500,000 want to stay. I don't know. But, for those who want to go, if they want to go, let them go. Right? I mean, having you're living in a town with a pile of rubble in Gaza, or you can go live in nice houses built in Egypt. I mean, running water and electricity sounds good to me, right? So let's get them to someplace better. All right, let's talk about Israeli politics. So last time I was talking about how Naftali Bennett's been up in the polls, the governing coalition has been down, and all this kind of thing. Well, Bibi has just announced that he is formally running for re-election, and I did say, I want to take a moment. I don't like to toot my own horn, but I really need to. So, why do I make the podcast? Why do I talk about Israeli politics? I was there. I was in the Knesset. Like I said, I've learned Israeli political culture, been following Israeli politics since I was a teenager. And I know a lot of people. I've been able to talk to a lot of people and learn a lot of things and gain a lot of perspective that I'm able to pass on to you so that everyone can listen to the show, gains access to that knowledge. So I said from the very beginning, after October 7th happened, that there would be no election, absolutely no election, until after the war was over, right? And I also said that while there would be polls and there would be Israeli politics would continue during the war to a certain degree, ultimately there'd be no talk of, with the polls and all of that, until the war is over, none of that really matters, right? There's no certainty. So talking about it there's always that caveat, a little bit of, just be aware that none of this matters. That's why I told you, a couple times I've talked about Israeli politics and said, okay, whatever that is, to go throw it in the trash can, because it's, the state of Israeli politics in, last March is irrelevant now, right? The result of the conflict is the big thing now. So Bibi is formally seeking re-election, right? That part is official now. And so there have been a few new polls now that he is formally seeking re-election and this kind of thing. And some of them, they're, the governing parties, which are, Likud is the center-right party. That's Bibi Netanyahu's party. They're the larger right-wing party. And they form a coalition because it's a multi-party proportional system, right? People vote for political parties. They get their proportion of 120 seats in the Knesset based upon um, the percentage of votes. So Likud is polling, if not ahead, very close to the next party, and I'll talk about that. But they're polling pretty well. Between 22 and 25 seats. That's pretty normal uh, for the larger party in Israel. There are some rare occasions where they've had 30 plus seats or what have you, but not lately. And their coalition partners are the two Orthodox parties, right? The Sephardic Orthodox Party, Shas, and the Ashkenazic Orthodox Party, United Torah Judaism. These are, the Orthodox Party. They want welfare for the Orthodox families, and they want the men to be able to study religion instead of working and not join the military and all this kind of stuff. So they join coalition because Bibi Netanyahu gives them what they want, right? And then there are the far right. And when I say far right, I mean far right, not, it's not one of these things where in the media, anyone who is, 1 degree left of woke left is far right, right? There are people out there, Elon Musk is far right. The guy's making electric cars to fight climate change. I don't think he's far right. Okay. He's actually pretty centrist and pretty, normal. It's just the left has gone so far off to, the left is already on Mars. They've beaten him there, metaphorically speaking, because they are way out there. And the sensible people have stayed put. And so now they're on the right wing of the spectrum, not because they're right wingers, but because the left has gone off the deep end. So, the far right in Israel, the Bezalel Smotrich and his party, the religious Zionists, you have Itamar Ben-Gvir and the Otzma Yehudit, the Jewish Strength Party. These are far right, okay, and they represent far right interests in Israel. Some say that they have like a diluted messianic vision of the world, or this kind of thing. They're wanting Israel to have all the land, and you get rid of the Arabs for the most part, and this kind of thing. And so they want religious laws instituted and that kind of thing. So a lot of people disagree with their position. That said, all of those together, we're polling down around 50 seats. In recent scenario polls, we're starting to get a few now where they're back up at 54, 55, 56 seats. Some have had them up as high as 58 seats. You need 61 seats to have a majority. So Bibi and his coalition et al. Are falling a little short of the majority. However, you'll remember what I've been saying since the beginning of this podcast. For 150 episodes, almost every episode, not everyone, I have reminded you that you have to take Israeli polls with a grain of salt, because while it is a proportional system and you can get a pretty good idea of the ballpark of where people are thinking, right? So if the polls show that Likud is polling around 22, 23 seats, chances are they're not going to get 40. Okay. If they were going to get 40, they'd be polling higher. You know what I'm saying? But they might get 26 seats or 27 seats if they have higher turnout. And turnout is the issue. Right-wing voters are very motivated. They're very enthusiastic. They are more likely to turn out in large numbers. Now, the left is trying to energize their people and get their turnout. I'm going to talk about the opposition parties here in a minute. But the right is a little bit more excited. So if right-wing voters show up in greater numbers, then the proportionality will favor them. And they could get 61, 62 seats, enough seats to form another government, right? So we'll see what happens. Elections could come next spring, as early as, if things are stabilized in Gaza. Unlikely. Like I said, elections are due by next December at the latest. So they will have elections next fall. They have to, because the Knesset has a 4-year term. The last elections took place December of 2022. So 2026, there have to be elections, right, by the end of the year. Okay, so that's the situation. Could Bibi survive? It is very plausible. I said on X the other day, it's unlikely, but possible. Um, and then I started looking at the polls. I'm like, actually, it's not as unlikely as it sounds. But you see, here I'm talking to you. I bring you evidence. Okay, I don't just go out there and pull these things out of my ear. To be polite, I don't just pull this out of thin air like, oh, this is going to happen. I look at evidence, and the evidence says that while it was unlikely a month ago, it is more likely today. There is a plausible scenario where Bibi could be reelected to serve one more term. There is also a good chance that the left will be enthusiastic enough that they will get a majority in the Knesset, or at least, more seats than Bibi's coalition, and that will lead to either a Frankenstein coalition, right, where you have far right-wing parties and left-wing parties all jumbled together in one coalition, like we had with the Change Bloc that governed until 2022, right, from 2021 to 2022. For 18 months, there was this conglomeration of 8 political parties from the right to the left. And it was a Frankenstein coalition. That's what it was. But so there could be that, right? But the chances that the greatest likelihood, the most plausible outcome, is that it'll be a hung parliament, which is a term from British politics, from British nomenclature, how we describe a parliament that is no majority and is not able to function. Right, not able to produce a government. And generally, when you have a hung parliament, you have another election. Now, Israel's done this before. They went through 4 elections in 2 years, right? And then had a 5th just 18 months later. So that's, a lot of elections. And all of that because center-right and center-left parties have refused to join coalition governments with Bibi. They have forced him to cultivate the far right in order to stay in office. He is the most popular person to be prime minister, although, individually, but he's also not been able to achieve a majority in many elections. And so that's probably what's going to happen again. But we'll see. I mean, like I said, if right-wing voters are more enthusiastic to turn out. Again, I have to remind you, I was absolutely right that there would be no election during the war and that the outcome of the war would be the key issue. Why is there a plausible scenario that Bibi could be reelected? Because of the way the war came out, right? On October 6th, before the terrible attack, Israel was surrounded. There was Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah, this major threat to the north, and Lebanon. We had Iran looming large from afar, and the Houthis were starting to be more and more a problem. And there are Iranian militias in Iraq, and of course, the government of Bashar al-Assad in Syria was an ally of the Iranians as well, even though there were lots of groups there that were against the Iranians. Generally speaking, the Iranians had sway with the titular government of Syria. And that was a terrible situation. Now, October 7th was a horrible attack. There were a lot of problems. A lot of the responsibility does rest with Bibi Netanyahu. Right? He allowed he appoints the people who are in office to, run the Shin Bet, the security agency, the Mossad, the intelligence agency, all of that. And an attitude had set in that the Palestinians were irrelevant. I talked about it a lot. The Palestinians had become irrelevant. But I pointed out on the podcast, the danger of their becoming irrelevant is that they will want to make themselves relevant again somehow. So either Israel had to keep them irrelevant, or, they're going to find some way to get back in the news. And that's one of those cases where I hate being right. And I said several times on the podcast over the years, what would happen if Hamas had access to Israeli civilians? On October 7th, I was proven horrifically right on all of those things. And anyway, since then, as horrible as that was, Israeli forces have moved into Gaza. Hamas is a shadow of its former self. All of their leaders have been whacked down to people in their 20s. They don't have any kind of experience. They don't have competent leaders. The planners of October 7th, they're all gone. The Hamas leadership, it's all been destroyed. And they've lost a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of their tunnels have been destroyed. We called it the Gaza Metro. They had all of these underground tunnels. A lot of them have been destroyed. Since the ceasefire broke down, Israel, when Israeli troops were killed, Israel went and did a little bit of bombing, and they were able to bomb tunnels that they could not have bombed before because there were hostages there. Again, Hamas uses human shields. So Hamas violated the ceasefire, and Israel took the opportunity to eliminate some of those tunnels. So they've done a lot of damage to Hamas. So Hamas is in really bad shape. The reason Hamas is going around whacking all the leaders of these other clans and killing the men of these groups is because they sense their weakness. They are afraid of being pushed out of power. All right. There was no danger of that on October 6th, 2023. Right. That's a huge change. And now there's a lot of international attention and pressure. It's not that they're irrelevant. They're very relevant, but the optics and the international attention are on a solution, not just Jews are bad. And that's huge. That's a combination of Bibi Netanyahu and his effectiveness, the effectiveness of his government, whatever you think. Could they have been more effective? A lot of my friends who are in the Israeli military were like, well, why don't they let us do this? And why won't they do that? And Bibi won't, they're complaining because Bibi wouldn't let them go get the enemy. And a lot of people on the left were like, well, we could have had this deal to get more hostages back and this kind of thing. So there are those who disagree with him and his approach. Okay. But Gaza is much better off than it was. Hezbollah, oh my God, they got beepered. It was a beautiful thing. I got on X 1 minute, everything was calm. Next minute, beepers were exploding. And I was like, this is great. How widespread is this? And a couple videos later, like everywhere all over Lebanon, people had been injured. It was amazing. The Israelis sold beepers through a shell company to the Hezbollah leadership. And these beepers had C4 in them with the battery, so that when, activated, when a certain code was sent to them, they detonated and boom. A lot of guys lost hands, legs, a lot of eye injuries. And let's just say that a good number were emasculated. But that destroyed the Hezbollah leadership. Again, everyone in Hezbollah who was important enough to have a pager got hit, right? And then they said, well, we'll switch to our walkie-talkies. No more cell phones, no more pages. We'll go to the walkie-talkies. The walkie-talkies were also provided through the shell company, the Definitely Not Mossad Inc. And they started using their walkie-talkies, and those blew up too. So that was brilliant. That really nipped Hezbollah in the butt. And when you nip them in the bud like that, without their leadership, Israel was able to go in and attack. Now that happened, kind of took out a lot of the upper and mid-level people, but not Hassan Nasrallah and the top people. But they all got together in a bunker while Bibi was talking to Donald Trump here in the U.S. and speaking at the UN. And Bibi gave the order, and shoom, boom, they blew up the bunker and blew up the Hezbollah leadership. So Hassan Nasrallah is dead, and the top leadership that had all managed to get themselves into one room at one time, kaboom. They also blew up Hezbollah's bank, where they had a lot of cash. Terrorists can't operate, they can't use the financial system like everybody else. They had a lot of cash and hard currencies and what have you in physical form in their bank. Boom, gone. So Hezbollah really took a pounding. And that pounding was so bad, and it weakened them so much, they could no longer prop up Bashar al-Assad. Right? Assad's regime was on three legs. Hezbollah was a major enforcer that kept his regime in power. The Russians were also keeping him in power. And the third leg was his Alawite minority. They're like a Socratic cult in the area, Socratic religion, semi-Muslim. Some would say they're Muslim, some would say they're not. The Islamic radicals certainly don't think so. They, like the Druze, they go and slaughter them whenever they can. In any event, Assad was in power on those three legs. And once the Hezbollah leg was pulled out, the whole thing came down. And Hezbollah was the part where Iran was backing Syria. Iran was helping him stay in power by having Hezbollah, go and fight and keep him in power. And so that regime collapsed, which means that Iran can no longer get weapons through Syria. Syria is closed off. And then the Syrians, this guy al-Shara and the new Syrian government went into Lebanon in a couple places and whacked Hezbollah. And they got the Russians pushed to the coast. They're not out yet. Sharad just met with Vladimir Putin, so apparently they're cozying up with the Axis powers now. But he's been spending his time slaughtering his own people, Christians, Druze, so many people getting killed. I mean, what happened in Soweto was unforgivable. Um, if you can't protect the minorities in your country, what good are you? Anyway, the fall of Syria. Okay, so Israel was surrounded by people just over the fence, right? You had Hamas organized, firing rockets, terrorizing people from Gaza. You had Hezbollah right over the border in the north, firing rockets, terrorizing people, constant threat. You had Syria right beyond the Golan Heights. Granted, we've got a mountain range in between the two, but there again, antagonistic, all gone. Not to say that they've been replaced by good guys, but they're all gone. The Lebanese army is slowly moving into Hezbollah's territory, disarming them, as part of a deal the U.S. and the Arabs worked out together. The Arabs have never liked Hezbollah being there. They want their people in power. They want the Lebanese government, the quote-unquote legitimate government, which isn't, but it tries to be. They could be more legitimate if they'd go and take out Hezbollah, and they're starting to do that. So we're getting there. But in any case, Hezbollah needs to worry about the Lebanese army and their fellow the Arabs, fellow Muslims, I should say. They're Shiites in southern Lebanon, mostly Arab, but some of the leaders of Hezbollah have been Iranians. In any case, they are they're underfoot. So they got bigger fish to fry than Israel right now. Okay, and they're surrounded. They have no friends in Syria. They're in deep trouble. So, and then Syria as well. So Israelis can live in a great deal more comfort and peace knowing that those enemies are gone. Now, Fatah and the Palestinian Authority, such as it is, Mahmoud Abbas and that group over in Judea and Samaria, what the international community erroneously calls the West Bank. West Bank of what? We don't know. Anyway, Judea and Samaria was what they've been called for 35 centuries, and so there they are. Anyway, in that territory, they are still there, and they still pay. And a bunch of their guys that were released from prison recently as part of this deal, they paid out over $70 million to terrorists. They pay people to murder Jews. Okay. In any event, they're still a threat, but a more mundane one. They have to play along with the other Arab governments, the Saudis, the Jordanians. They can't get away with a lot. They've played the game with the international community. The reason Mahmoud Abbas is wealthy is that they get aid that he can steal from Europe and the US and other governments. So, that's they're a little bit. I don't want to say they're the good terrorists, but they're a little bit more mundane. They're the "we'll kill you in 100 years" people versus the "we'll kill you tomorrow" people. So they're a little bit more under thumb, let's just say. Not as bad. Still a problem, but not as bad. Meanwhile, Iran is trying to keep its influence in Iraq, and they've got the Houthis. And even then, they've had the snot bomb. And then Israel went and attacked. Iran had been attacking Israel, so the Israelis went and they bombed them. Bombed the snot out of Iran. Iran had no air defenses for a while there. Israel could do whatever they want. Israeli jets were flying at relatively low altitude over Tehran just to remind people, hey, we can fly wherever we want to. And the Iranians hearing the sounds of these jet engines. This is awesome. So Israel was able to do all of that. And because of that, when the opportunity arose, President Trump was able to send the B-2 bombers on Operation Midnight Hammer. My second son has the T-shirt. They were very big fans of that. Dropping the GBU-57 bunker busters, blowing up the nuclear facilities at, in Iran, and those nuclear facilities are no longer a threat. They do have some enriched uranium. It's not weapons grade yet, but it's getting closer. They could theoretically start up again. So there's still issues there, but their nuclear program has been halted for the time being. They'll try to restart, but a lot of their scientists have also been killed. Israeli agents in Iran went and assassinated a bunch of the scientists. The point is, Iran was months, maybe, from having a nuclear weapon. They had allies, to the left, to the right, above and below Israel. They had Syria, they had Iraq, they had, the Houthis in Yemen. They had all these things going for them. And now they're hanging on to Iraq by a shoestring. to part of Iraq, the Shiite area of Iraq, south of Baghdad, and the Houthis have had the snot kicked out of them, even though they're still able to harass shipping and occasionally fire a ballistic missile at Israel. Um, but the Iranians aren't able to build a lot of those munitions anymore because those factories were destroyed. So when you look at it, whether you love him or hate him, Bibi Netanyahu has been a very effective war prime minister. He's devastated Iran. He's devastated Hezbollah and Hamas. Syria collapsed. The Houthis are under thumb to a degree, and Israeli naval forces and air forces have been able to go down to Yemen and inflict serious pain. So Israel is able to project force. This is the beginnings of an offensive military. That's something that, Ryan Macbeth is always talking. Israel doesn't have an offensive military. They can't go overseas and attack people, right? So there's that. Okay. So that's the situation there. Could Bibi be reelected? It is plausible. It is exactly as I said. The way the war comes out, and we're not quite done yet. We still need to know what's going to happen in the next few months. But sometime early in the next year, we will know whether Bibi really has a good shot at survival. And if this works out with Gaza, if the relocation program goes forward, if Hamas is ultimately disarmed, whatever happens in the next few months, that will determine the final nail in the coffin. But a lot of this stuff has been pretty good. And the opposition to Bibi are saying, well, he divided the country and all this kind of thing. Well, I mean, he's a right-wing politician, and there's been a lot of politics since October 7th. A lot of that's died down because, of course, getting the hostages back and winning the war was the most important issue. Now, the opposition. So the main difference that gets under my skin in terms of Bibi versus the opposition is that Bibi is a one-man show. He drives away from him other competent people who might disagree here or there. He likes yes men. He wants things done his way. Now, he's been pretty effective doing things his way. I'm not knocking that, but he's the Bibi show. I personally prefer more collegial systems. I like a good leader, but I like a system where you have several top people who are really bright, who bring something to the table. So the last government, the Change Bloc government, the Frankenstein coalition of 8 political parties, they had Benny Gantz, who's the former IDF chairman. He'd run the IDF as an Air Force general. He was the defense minister, right? They had Yair Lapid as foreign minister. He's a very good diplomat. Not as great a prime minister or a leader, but he's a former journalist. He's a very effective diplomat. He did a lot of good diplomatic work. Naftali Bennett was prime minister, right? He proved to be a better leader than people thought he was, even for heading a coalition that was a Frankenstein coalition. The point is, you had a number of top people, really good people. And I don't want to say it's government by committee because it was led by Bennett and Lapid, but the point is you had a lot of great people in top positions. Bibi Netanyahu is all about being the Bibi show, and it's all about him. I prefer more collegial governments. Right now, in America, it doesn't quite work that way. The president is very powerful, gets his way. It's not our system's not set up to be government by committee. At the same time, Donald Trump has Scott Bessent, has Marco Rubio, inarguably the best Secretary of State, and Trump even said so. Best Secretary of State anyone can remember, right? At least since Henry Kissinger, depending on how you measure Henry Kissinger. There's some good, there's some bad. I have a mixed view on Mr. Kissinger, but at the same time, you have Rubio doing a great job, and of course, he's also the national security advisor and the memes going out there after they deported the head of the superintendent of the Des Moines public schools. There's a picture of Marco frowning, and it's like, when you've just found out you're about to become the superintendent of the Des Moines public schools, it's like Trump gives every job to Marco. But Marco's doing a great job. Scott Bessent understands the economy better than anyone I've seen in forever. It's unbelievable, my friends. He is so much better a Secretary of the Treasury. I don't think we've had a better Secretary of the Treasury than Scott Bessent since Alexander Hamilton had the job in the first place. He gets the economy. He understands the financial challenges we're facing, and he's attacking them. He's dealing with the real issues. The guy is bright. He's also gay because, Trump hates gay people, and he wants to, round them all up into concentration camps, including Scott Bessent, apparently. Where's that come from? Anyway, I don't even care what his preferences are. The man is very competent. He's doing a great job. That's what's important to me. And, Pete Hegseth has done a good job at the Defense Department. They want to rename the War Department. Like I said, the whole world's on fire, and we're going to rename the firehouse. Okay, if we must. That isn't official because Congress has to pass a law to make that happen, but they're calling it the Department of War. Anyway, the DoD/DOW has been getting fitness standards back up, and they're starting to get. I mean, my second son is thinking about joining the military, and so we've been looking at the fitness standards, like to work on, like, how many push-ups does he have to be able to do? How many sit-ups does he have to be able to do? How fast does he have to be able to run? So he can, go out there and adequately prepare himself for boot camp. Believe me, I qualified for all of the physical requirements to join the Navy before I joined the Navy. And I'm glad I did, because man, boot camp kicked my butt. I mean, you do a lot of exercising, you build up your muscle, and but I did all the things I had to do in order to qualify beforehand. So I knew I could do it physically. And boy, was I so much stronger, healthier, fitter, strong, just full of muscle when I came out. If I could look like that again, my friends, to be 19 again. Oh, that was a great time. In any case, so we're working on that. And we're looking at it like the Army says, well, you have to be able to run 2 miles in 22 minutes. I mean, when I was in the Navy, you had to be able to run 1.5 miles in 13 minutes. I did it in a little over 9 myself. Okay. So, that's how you have to do these things. Right. And, women standards, you tend to be a little bit lower. But Secretary Hegseth has said we're going to have to, up the standards in this kind of thing. I know that's domestic politics. I digress. In any case, it's an issue for me because I'm thinking about it. It's like, we have to get people fit. Like, you can't be fat in the military. I'm sorry. Like, you need to be fit. And yes, women can have different standards, but if you're going to go into combat roles, you have to be able to meet the male standard. Because the fact is, when you're in battle, if you have a wounded comrade and you have to drag or carry that comrade somewhere to get them out of danger, it's unfair to have someone who can't carry you, and you got guys in there that are 200 pounds, full of muscle and what have you, and you've got guys who are, more like 120, right? And who, you have to be able to drive anyway. Okay. But that's the point. So yes, Trump is very much a strong leader and he's doing his thing, but he's got Vance, he's got Rubio, he's got Hegseth, he's got Bessent, he's got a good team of people. And I've not even gotten to Kristi Noem and Pam Bondi and so many other great. I mean, this administration has some really top people. Okay. Anyway, that's what I would prefer. More top people. Right. And Bibi is very much about him. Now, what's up with the opposition? So I told you guys Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister, he's been kind of taking Bibi's agenda, the sort of right-wing agenda, and he's presenting like right without Bibi. He's been polling up close to Likud, 22, 23, 24 seats. Sometimes he's a seat or two ahead, sometimes he's a seat or two behind, but he's right in their neck of the woods. So he's kind of leading the opposition right now. Behind him, Yair Lapid, again, former journalist, center-left in this case, basically like a free market left in Israel. And he's still in the running. There's talk of him merging with another party maybe and maybe pulling together and trying to, mass their votes, but we'll see. Right now, it's there's no election, so it's too early to tell. And Gadi Eisenkot, he has left the Blue and White Party. So Blue and White, or National Unity, was Benny Gantz's party. And, Benny Gantz has joined coalitions with Bibi a couple of times and left. And Eisenkot is just kind of done with him. Mostly the issue was, I don't want to go into too much, I don't want to bore you guys, but so with these political parties in Israel, some of them work like political parties that we would imagine. So like Likud, they have a party central committee that makes policies, what have you. Likud members vote on who's the leader. They vote on who the candidates will be for Knesset. There's internal party structures that are democratic, and they choose people based on who's popular. There's more merit. I mean, politics. Sometimes, honestly, the handsome guy or the good-looking lady gets a few more votes than other people because of their looks or whatever. But the fact is, for the most part, it's people promoting issues and competencies that they support. Anyway, so um, you have Eisenkot there. He was in a party with Benny Gantz. Benny Gantz, you can create a political party in Israel where you just have a leader who picks a list of people, and the party is very top down. It's that leader and their people. For the most part, those are the smaller parties in Israel, 3, 4, 5 seats, and it's not a big deal. But in that, Benny Gantz was kind of running the party that way, and Eisenkot, he got tired. So Gadi took his voters and went elsewhere, and he's created a new party called Yashar, um, and that party is centrist, center right. They were for bringing the hostages home and not being they there's a feeling that Bibi has missed opportunities to bring hostages home by failing in negotiations. I don't see it myself, but hey, everyone each to his own and his opinion. So that's their opinion. That's kind of their angle, and it kind of occupying the space that Benny Gantz occupied, which was very centrist, showing military competence as Gadi Eisenkot can, and he's also from military background. Eisenkot, it's hard to talk about. His son was a major in the IDF, and his son was killed in Gaza fighting there. So he has he's what we would call a Gold Star family. Someone who's lost someone in combat. So that's a terrible thing to happen to somebody. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. So he's sacrificed. He has, and so there's a feeling there. The Labour Party and the Meretz Party, the two far left parties, have merged into what they call democracy, or the Democrats. They're the far left. Labour has been kind of the Social Democrats or Socialist Party in Israel for a long time. They were the main political party until about 1977. Since then, they haven't been in government much. They haven't been leading governments much, but they were still relevant until about until Ariel Sharon. Ariel Sharon really destroyed Labor. In any case, they're polling in the 7 to 8 seats. I mean, they're not doing that great. But in the last election, I told you Meretz, which means vigor. They're the vigor party. The far left, LGBTQ, climate change. They're the woke left. The socialist left, at least, is still about workers and that kind of stuff in theory. But Meretz is the woke left. They're the protest left party. The people, like the Green Party is here, the people you vote for when the left isn't wacky enough for you. So see me rolling my eyes. I know you're just listening, but you can imagine me rolling my eyes. Anyway, they didn't clear the threshold last time because you have to get 3.5% or 3.25%, excuse me, you have to get a minimum of 3.25% of the total vote in order to earn seats in the Knesset. And Meretz fell below that. So they're merged, and together they're polling very low like that, but they are still there on the left. There's Hadash Ta'al, which is the Arab party. Hadash is like the Arab Communist Party, and Ta'al is like a Arab nationalist party, and they don't join coalitions, and they're against Israel, and they're against everything. And then there's Ra'am, led by Mansour Abbas, and I've talked about them before. They are Arab nationalists, but they've been willing to join coalitions before. They are concerned about the interests of Israeli Arabs. It's like, instead of just not joining the government, not participating, Mansour Abbas has taken the approach that if he joins these government, he can actually create some good for the people and the Arab Israelis, and he has here and there. Okay, so that's your opposition there. There's still, Avigdor Lieberman's still out there. I've talked about, nationalist Russian immigrants to Israel, and kind of a secular right party. He's still kicking around out there. So those are the parties in the opposition for the most part, with the exception of Hadash Ta'al and Ra'am to a lesser extent. Although now that the war is over, you could more reliably form a coalition with an Arab party, maybe. In any case, they're not polling in the majority either. They are without Ra'am, they're falling short. Without Hadash Ta'al, they fall short. So again, they're polling in the minority. Even if you include Ra'am, they don't quite get to 61. So we're back to this hung parliament thing. But that's the opposition. That's where Israeli politics stands now. And now that the war is sort of coming to an end, we're starting to see kind of how things are shaking out, right? And there are surprises. I mean, when Roosevelt died a month into his administration in 1945 and Harry S. Truman became president, he wasn't very well known. He had run for vice president just the previous year. He was chosen as a successor by Roosevelt as someone who was seen as being honest. And Roosevelt felt that if something happened to him, Truman was a guy who could take over for him. And Truman completely upset the political system in 1948 by winning the election, right? Shortly after he came to office, we finished the war in Germany, and then we dropped the bomb on Japan a few months later, and that war ended. Then there was a recession after the wars. Things switched back to, there was a lot of stuff going on, and the Republicans had control of Congress. They paid down some of the war debt. And by 1948, the country was kind of meh. And, Dewey didn't think he had to campaign very hard. So, late in the night, as the returns were coming in, people thought Dewey had won. Ergo, the great, picture of Harry Truman holding up the newspaper. Dewey wins. At the last minute, it turns out that Truman came in ahead in Wisconsin and won the election. And that was a surprise to a lot of people. He got 4 more years. So never say never, right? But again, the results of the war and the aftermath and the rising temperature of the Cold War drove that result. So we'll see what happens now. If Bibi were to win another term, he'd be prime minister till almost 2030. That means that he'd have been prime minister since 2009, with the exception of the 18 months of the Change Bloc coalition, the Frankenstein coalition I talked about. Then he was prime minister for 2.5 years back in the 90s. So I mean, almost 3 years. I mean, we're talking about when he leaves office. If he were to leave office in 2030, I mean, darn near 24 years as prime minister. Be a new record. We had 13 years for Ben-Gurion, and since then prime ministers have come and gone, except for Bibi. Is it possible? It could happen. It really depends on the turnout. Circumstances are possibly there. Anyway, I've talked about Israeli politics. I'm going to kick over into international affairs, talk about the Axis powers briefly. This time, a couple of interesting things in European news, and Japan has a new prime minister. So I'll kick that around real quick, and then I'll close this out, because I don't want an episode that's 2 hours long like last one. Thank you, Mozart. We have a little bit of music. Glad I was able to get that snippet into the show. So we got a little bit of good music here. Good entertainment. Okay. In the last episode, I took Donald Trump to task for his absolutely wrong approach to Ukraine right from the beginning. And I worried I was going a little too hard on him. I mean, he sort of changed position. He seemed to get what was going on. And I thought maybe I'm just being a little too rough. Maybe I should ease up a little bit. So I had planned to spend this episode praising his policy on Ukraine and then moving on to other international issues. Unfortunately, not so much. I mean, I'm not going to be as critical as I was last time. But I do have to say, I mean, we're hearing stories after, let me back up a little bit. So there was talk of the U.S. selling Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. These Tomahawks would have the range to do damage in Russia, deep into Russia. Ukraine's already able to attack those places with, drones and what. But these would be really serious firepower. Heavy explosives, able to be delivered over a long distance. And our Tomahawk cruise missiles are really good, very effective weapon system. So that was dangled out there. And then Putin got on the phone with Donald, and all of a sudden, we're not sending Tomahawks. And at first I thought, well, hopefully this is just a negotiating tactic. But there are a lot of memes going around that, one image you see, the first panel, it's Trump, we're going to give tomahawks to Ukraine. And then the next panel is Putin calling Trump and saying, don't give them tomahawks. And the next panel is Trump saying, we're not giving tomahawks to Ukraine. It really makes Trump look like he's Putin's puppet. Now, he's not. I know that. We all know that. But it doesn't look good. This is very bad optics. So now we've gone from he's taken entirely the wrong and completely idiotic position, like, against all the expert advice, against everything. He thought he had a good relationship with Vladimir Putin and he could end the war. And so the approach there was to get Ukraine to a position where they were ready to concede enough to get the Russians to stop fighting. Again, that entire approach assumes that Russia can be appeased. If you're going to appease your enemy, you have to know that they are capable of being appeased. I mean, when Chamberlain went to Munich to meet with Hitler, with Herr Hitler, and make a deal over Czechoslovakia, he knew Hitler could be appeased with the Sudetenland. But or he thought, but if your opponent isn't even willing to be appeased with that, you can't appease them. So I understand Trump's motivation. He thinks if he can end this war, it stops the killing. He does actually care about people. He wants that to stop. Most of the killing is Russia firing indiscriminately at Ukrainian civilians, nice people. And we've gone, around and around on this issue. But all of the experts, myself, everyone from, left-wing voices like Peter Zion to right-wing historians like Neil Ferguson, Senator Ted Cruz, again, everyone who knows anything about Middle East policy, Russia policy, European policy, about what's going on in the world, all the geopolitics experts, all the Russia experts, Stephen Kotkin, for God's sake, who's written, 2-part, now soon to be 3-part biography of Joseph Stalin. I mean, all of the experts have said Russia wants Ukraine. They have to control Ukraine. They cannot have a free Ukraine on their border. Ukraine cannot join the European Union. Ukraine cannot be democratic. Russia will not tolerate that because they want to Putin wants to reestablish the Soviet Empire. They have to control Ukraine. So Trump thought he had a good relationship with Putin. Turns out he didn't. It was an abusive and toxic relationship. In any case, we've gotten this situation where now, Putin has been unwilling to make peace. Like, we got Ukraine to be willing to make all the concessions and, sacrifice 1/5 of their country and all this kind of stuff. And Putin wouldn't stop shooting. There's no ceasefire. Why? Because they can't. He can't stop where he is. He has to destroy Ukraine. This is his only opportunity. Europe is rearming. If he doesn't have some part of the agreement where no one can arm Ukraine, or Zelensky has to resign, or the government of Ukraine has to fall, if he doesn't have something like that, it doesn't do him any good to stop shooting. What he wants is to put himself in a better strategic position for the next war. That'll happen a few years later, when whatever the situation is more advantageous to him. That's the only reason he would stop shooting, and at this point he doesn't see that either. So we've gone around and around and around, with the Ukrainians willing to make concessions and Russia unwilling to make peace, unwilling to make peace, unwilling to make peace, ad nauseum, ad infinitum. It just keeps going. How long are we going to ride this carousel? Round and round we go. And the idea of giving tomahawks to Ukraine, giving Ukraine real weapons that could really damage Russia, give them a chance to go, and really win this war. Because the Russian economy is in deep trouble. They're running out of gas because of the destruction of the various petrol refineries in Russia. The Russian bank, the state bank, has said that they've basically done everything they can do. They're at the end of the rope. They've spent all the money they can spend. They've lent all the money they can lend. Slowly but surely, everything in Russia is coming apart. Now, lots of people have been saying, the Russian economy is collapsing for years, and I've talked about that. They can soldier on, and they will. Putin will go until Russia literally stops, as long as it achieves this end. He will destroy the entire country. If he doesn't get Ukraine, then there's no point in having Russia. I mean, that's how important this is to him. The only way to stop him is to make him stop, to defeat him on the battlefield. But no one's willing to try that. It seemed like Trump was going to go that direction. Then, we had all this happen, and they planned this summit in Hungary, and where Viktor Orban is a friend of Putin's, and we were gonna do that. And as it turns out, um, Zelensky and Trump were going to meet, and we have this situation where we're hearing from this meeting that there was, vulgar language from Donald Trump, that he was shoving aside the maps that Zelensky was showing, that he was telling Zelensky, why don't you just take Russia's deal, and this kind of stuff. And um, it I mean, my friends, this brings shame on the United States. I mean, this is absolutely reprehensible behavior to treat a world hero and a man defending his country from a foreign aggressor. Again, I mean, it's okay to be rude to a Jew. I know, I understand. We're sniveling, conniving trolls with horns on our head, and Zelensky's one of us, and therefore, I guess that extends to him too. But this is just ridiculous. It is absolutely asinine, childish, petty. He's again uh, apparently. I mean, I don't know for sure, but we're hearing that Trump quoted more Russian talking points. I mean, this is just um, it's getting tiresome, and that's why there isn't peace. Is because we're not on side with our allies. So it's embarrassing. Um, since Donald Trump became, I mean, not just since he became, I mean, Joe Biden did the same thing. This is just how we've allowed things to go down in Ukraine is a shame on our country, and it shows that we're weak. I mean, Donald Trump is made a statement now to Putin saying that, well, Putin should accept the front lines where they are now. I'll talk about the crux of where we are. That he should accept the front lines where we are right now because he's earned it with blood and guts. So are we establishing that it's okay for countries to expand their borders by force and whatever they fight to capture, they can win? I mean, Xi Jinping is sitting over there in Beijing and he's like, I love it. Okay, Donald, I go take Taiwan. I lost 500,000 soldiers. Lots of blood and guts. It's mine now. Hey, Donald's willing to make that deal, right? Sounds like it. I mean, we are signaling to the world that we're ready to give up control, to give up Pax Americana, to let everybody fight each other. Right? Trump's made all these peace deals, and yet that statement right there is like tugging at the thread. Just the whole thing could come undone. Now, I'm making a big deal. It's not as big deal as it sounds. It's just one of these things where I know Trump tends to say things his own way and this kind of thing. Normally, we don't have this problem. Well, Trump will make a statement that people will misunderstand or what have you. But generally speaking, he's on message and he's on point. This is just embarrassing. This is entirely wrongheaded. Anyway, the crux of the problem now is Ukraine is willing to make a deal where the Russians stop at the current front lines. There's a ceasefire and the war ends, right? The fighting ends, right? And then Ukraine is willing to negotiate from there. But I mean, they can't give up their territory. They're constitutionally bound to keep their territory. Well, the Russians claim, Putin claims, that they've annexed Crimea, Kherson, Zaporizhia, the Donbass et al., right? Donetsk and Luhansk, that all of those people have voted to join Russia, even though significant parts of those districts, the district borders, the oblast district, anyway, have never been under Russian control. They claim that they've had, and now Russia has it as part of their constitution that they can't give them up. And so what Putin is demanding is that Ukraine retreat hundreds of kilometers into Ukraine, giving up their current defensive fortifications, and let Russia have territory that they could not conquer and will not conquer, right? As Ukraine is on the verge of maybe turning this thing around. The Russians are in real bad shape. Anyway, this is just ridiculous. It puts Putin in a great strategic position to start the war again in the future, and the Ukrainians are going to have to rebuild their defenses and really keep a watch, because the Russians will attack again as soon as Putin finds it advantageous to do so. Meanwhile, he's dangling with Donald Trump all these goodies, like we're going to build a tunnel and we're going to have all these economic deals. Donald, Russia is broke. They have no people. The great white the great Russian ethnicity, the ethnicity that has been Russia, the White Russians, there's different groups there, but anyway, the great Russian ethnicity is dying. Their demographics are terrible, and in 20 years their population is going to decline significantly. By the end of the century, basically, they're not going to be a factor anymore. There are no business deals with Russia. There's nothing for us to get from them. Let them go. Like, they need to be defeated. Meanwhile, China desperately needs that war to continue. They need the chaos. They need our resources tied up there, right? The Chinese have even admitted this publicly. They will not they cannot allow this war to end, because then the US can pivot our resources to the Pacific, and that's bad for the Chinese. So, again, Axis powers: China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, black and white, right? The good guys and the bad guys. Those are the bad guys. Let's fight the bad guys. Let's defeat the bad guys. Vladimir Putin's such a good guy. Why won't he stop fighting? He is demanding territory his troops have not been able to conquer from the Ukrainians in order to make peace. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's an excuse not to make peace. And, as long as he's full of these excuses, let's just give Ukraine what they need to win. So that's what I hope will ultimately happen. Meanwhile, Europe has to step up. Merz and his coalition has the SPD, the Social Democrats. They're weak-kneed about all this stuff. You have Emmanuel Macron, who likes to talk big, but when it comes time to walk the walk, there's not much walking that happens. It is more like he gets slapped by his wife and he loses his anyway. So he's not doing much. Europeans need to step up and do more to help Ukraine. The Taurus missiles, there's talk of giving the Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Those are good cruise missiles that the Ukrainians can use. Lots of good stuff coming, but the Europeans really have to step it up. And they're looking to buy things like, Ukraine is buying Patriot missile batteries from the US with the benefit of foreign money, so it's like this kind of thing. Anyway, we need Europe to step up, and they are, slowly but surely, but they're old and tired, and they haven't done this in a while. And the fact is, they're pulling munitions from the same pool. So the worry is that if the Baltic states, and Poland have had Russian drones flying in and planes flying over, the idea is to scare them into buying more munitions in the short term that don't go to Ukraine. Right? Because if they feel they have to defend themselves, we're drawing from the same limited supply chains. And that's something the Russians are trying to disperse the weapons to places other than Ukraine. And so we got to keep on message, keep on point, and get that done. Russia has to go down to defeat. If they're defeated in Ukraine, Russia will never pose a threat to us again. Their history, they're finished. Their nuclear weapons are rusting and rotting away. If they're defeated in Ukraine, it's over. Okay? Said and done. And then China's in deep trouble, because we can then direct our resources over there. So we should be looking for a way to win the war in Ukraine and not, to surrender our allies, to appease our enemies. Okay, end of rant on that. So I've talked a little bit about European politics. I have to say something about Keir Starmer's government in Britain. It's an embarrassment. They're doing so badly there. I can't wait till the next election. Unfortunately, it's not due for a while, but Reform UK, the Nigel Farage's party, is polling way ahead, and they're that it looks like they're going to take office if when there's an election, if it's held today. So Starmer and the Labour government are really shooting themselves in the foot. This is probably going to be the last Labour government for some time, and that's how bad it is. And reform will completely change the political map in Britain. So we'll see what happens there. But, when British police are arresting Jews for wearing the Magen David, the Star of David, it's, they're, the symbol was upsetting the protesters, the neo-Nazi anti-Israel protesters in Britain. Unbelievable. God. I mean, to see Britain descending into fascism, it's unfortunate. This is part of Europe needing to get their act together. It's coming. It's coming. Europe will. Unfortunately, the alternatives to these, like Reform UK and Rally National in France, the Marine Le Pen's party, they're not so good. on Russia. They've taken a lot of money from Russia in the past. A lot of their members have said questionable things about Russia. So I mean, like, on the one hand, the right could get into power and stop placating these immigrants, and they have their freedom in the UK, but they're not allowed to take it over. There's not going to be any Sharia law and no-go zones and this nonsense, and it is absolutely not okay to be molesting children in the UK. And then when a young Scottish girl defends herself from this, she gets arrested. It's like, oh my God, people. That's a great message to send. So what's the next girl supposed to do? Just let it happen? Wow. Anyway, but then at the same time, if these parties come to office, are they really going to defend Europe? It remains to be seen. So hopefully Europe will head in the right direction. In the meantime, it's up to the US to have a pair and go defeat Russia and start working on China. We've got them over a barrel economically. It's just, it's going to require a little more grit. So we'll get there. A lot of good stuff happening. Don't mean to be so hard on the Donald, but it's getting ridiculous. Some of the stuff is not right. So Japan has a new prime minister, the Liberal Democratic Party, which has been the main party in Japan since the end of the Second World War. With few exceptions, they've led most of the government. They have chosen a new leader after Ishiba went down. The Liberal Democrats lost their majority in the upper house, in the Diet, in the Japanese parliament. And they are also very much their government in a minority in the House of Representatives, the lower house. So they are in trouble politically. And the main party that's been causing so much problem to them is the Sanseido Party, which is a nationalist far-right party that is anti-immigration. Now, Japan has taken in a few immigrants because they have a shrinking workforce and an aging population, and they need people to drive the buses and perform services in Japan. I mean, Japanese youngsters are working 10-hour days and don't have a lot of time off. There aren't a lot of them to go around, so their labor, they're stretching out their hours to get more work done. And they've been bringing in some immigrants. Well, they've had some Muslim immigrants, and there have been incidents in Japan for the first time in a long time of, people harassing women on the streets and this kind of thing. And so the Japanese people have zero tolerance for this kind of thing, and they are very upset about it. At the same time, they have an aging population and a very low birth rate. I mean, at this point, if the trends continue the way it is, the last Japanese person will be born in the year 3001. And I mean, long before that, Japanese civilization will have disappeared. So they're going to have to figure out something. I mean, unfortunately, 40% of the people under 40 in Japan have never even done the thing that leads to reproduction. And that means that, they're hopeless. How are they going to have more children? One would hope that they could turn their demographic difficulties around, but unfortunately, it's just not happening. In any case, it is good to see a prime minister who is, for the Liberal Democrats. I mean, she's not Sanseido, but she's anti-immigration. She has traditional views about same-sex marriage and this kind of thing. And she's known for being hardline on China. This is very nationalist, but more moderately so than Sanseido. So I'm really glad to hear that she's coming to office. So so that's the story of Takaichi Sanai. She is their new prime minister. You'll also see that's written Sanai Takaichi. The Japanese put the family name first, so, Kaito Isoku desu. So this is, the way they do things. So I prefer their system, Takaichi Sanai. So they have a female prime minister for the very first time. And it's kind of interesting because she also opposes female emperors. So, Emperor Naruhito, who Naruhito is the new emperor of late, has been noting that the royal family is getting very small. The demographic problems are not just the Japanese people, but also the imperial family. And therefore, maybe they might accept a queen here and there. I mean, they've had empresses before of Suiko and a few others, but, that was back in the Heian period a long time ago. So they're they're not keen on that. But there is precedent. It is possible. In any case, she opposes this and wants more tradition. Whatever works. But, hopefully she can head off the Salcedo party. She's forming a minority coalition. Government of minority means that they won't have a majority to pass legislation, but they can count on, they can propose popular legislation. Some outside parties may help them, including Salcedo, on issues like immigration and what have you. So we'll see. But, they're going to try to pull it together, get Japan back on track, and go from there. And of course, Japan is a key trade partner and a key ally for the United States. So what happens there is important. So there are also a number of women in the cabinet that are more important as well. I'll talk about that in the future. Anyway, I got to end this episode. I don't want to run too long. So, please find the podcast on X, Mensch-Kight Geopolitics, and like there, and that way you can get news up to date from me, in real time. I'm only able to post these episodes every so often, and of course I'm doing commentary on the macro, the overarching stories going on. So that's what I'm doing. Anyway, so please do that. Like the podcast, review it. Like I said, I'm terrible at doing all these things that grow the podcast. I just want to produce a good podcast for you guys and get the issues out there. Anyway, with that, I will say, as always, goodbye, Lehitrod.
Writers of the history, stand with me. Look into my eyes and see. People go away but never say goodbye. Someone stole the moon tonight, took my light. Everything is black and white. Who's the fool who told you boys don't cry? Hours and hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why? The time goes by. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Living in a fantasy, ecstasy. Everything is meant to be. We shall pass, but love will never die. Hours and hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why? The time goes wild. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. שמפעיל לישון, אין מקום, אין אותי מיום ליום, כולם ילדים טובים אחד אחד. Bring them back home.